Angelique Hauser with the Cupertino Chamber of Commerce, and I would like to welcome you to our Silicon Valley Mayors Forum. This forum is a collaborative effort made possible by the Cupertino Chamber of Commerce, the Silicon Valley Central Chamber of Commerce, and the Sunnyvale Chamber of Commerce. As all of us cautiously look towards economic recovery, the work of our organizations and others like us will be increasingly important. Today, we are joined by the Mayor of Cupertino, Stephen Scharf, Mayor of Santa Clara, Lisa Gillmor, and the Mayor of Sunnyvale, Larry Klein. Our moderator for the day is Russ Hancock, CEO of the joint ventures Silicon Valley. Let's get down to business, and Russ, over to you.
Thank you very much, and ladies and gentlemen on this Zoom. I'm delighted that you've joined us. I was so pleased and honored that I was asked to moderate our conversation today. And I think it's wonderful that three mayors are joining us and that they're willing to talk candidly about their cities and the extraordinary set of circumstances that is facing them and facing all of us. So thank you. Thanks to all. Thanks to everybody for joining in the spirit of community today. I thought it would be really fun and interesting if we just started with an opening statement from each of the three mayors. And the idea is that each mayor will just tell us about the state of things in their city as of right now, as of 11:02 a.m. on this Thursday morning. We're of course dealing with a health crisis, an economic crisis, and now also all of the social tensions around the tragedy surrounding the racially charged incident. So there's lots to talk about. We're going to go in random order. I will just pick a mayor randomly. And let me also tell all of you who are listening that we're putting the mayors on the spot. These are not prepared statements that you're hearing from. We're just going to ask them to speak extemporaneously. And Mayor Klein, why don't we start with you? How are things in Sunnyvale?
Things are great in Sunnyvale. You know, and that's what all the mayors will probably say. But, you know, from our standpoint, I've been working, you know, to help out residents, you know, help out businesses as much as possible. You know, over the last 3 months, it's amazing that we've already passed, you know, 3 months of sheltering in place. And from a Sunnyvale standpoint, the mayor has some flexibility of making sure what gets on our agendas. And so we've extended kind of the eviction moratorium that the county put in place. We've done things, you know, from donating, and we'll probably talk about that more, to our community service organization, as well as trying to make sure our businesses are doing well. And then as president, so besides being mayor for Sunnyvale, I'm also president of the Cities Association of Santa Clara County, and advocating for all of our cities to make sure that we find a way to move forward from either testing and tracing or recovery standpoint has been, you know, taking a lot of my time. And then finally, you know, from the racial tension, from a response to what's been happening around the nation and around the Bay Area. We actually have a protest in Sunnyvale tomorrow night, and preparing for that, making sure that our residents, you know, understand what our police force does, and also, you know, the commitment to have an open dialogue with our residents on how we change what those policies are within our department.
Mayor Klein, are you implementing a curfew in Sunnyvale?
No, we did not do it. We did not implement a curfew. I've had, you know, discussions with the city manager, and it just didn't seem the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Great. I'm going to catch you completely off guard. You're not prepared for this, I know, but I'm also wondering if you'll say something personally. When you took this job, when you were sworn in as mayor, I'm sure you did not see a health crisis and an economic crisis and a racial crisis happening simultaneously on your watch. So personally, what has that been like for you?
So it's been a little overwhelming at times. You know, a year ago, you know, when you sign up to be on city council, you do it because you love your city. And as much as, you know, some people see it as a stepping stone to other office, the majority of the people that are on city council, this is as far as they'll ever go in political office. And, you know, so I joined about 4 years ago, wanting to do more for my city. I never thought 3.5 years later that I would be mayor. So I was chosen as mayor in January of 2019. Last year we had a hate crime incident, and so it was dealing with the community tension and the issues of having a hate crime in your city, and trying to make sure that people feel safe. And the last 3 months, as far as COVID, has just been extraordinary as far as the trying to build community while people shelter in place, making sure that everyone has what they need as far as food, as far as supplies, as far as medication, changing, pivoting, what happens at the city standpoint was never what I expected, taking on the mayor role, but outreach in the community and having a strong communication with so many residents has only made that more useful and been easier to deal with the hundreds of emails that I'm now receiving from around the nation of how Sunnyvale should change its policing policy. So,
sure.
So yeah, it is a very interesting time from that standpoint.
He said with understatement.
Yeah.
Let's go to the great city of Santa Clara. We have with us Mayor Gillmor. Please, your opening statement.
Thank you. If I can figure out, here in Santa Clara, we're the center of what's possible, and I need to figure out how to work my computer. So
you are highly adept. You're doing just fine.
Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. I'm really excited to be here, especially in the presence of Mayor Klein and Mayor Scharf, our beloved cities, surrounding us in Santa Clara. So there's a lot going on, and I have to say it's challenging. I wake up in the morning and never know what I'm going to encounter during the day, whether everything that's going on in the world around us. And so we've had to learn how to adapt in the city of Santa Clara. Prior to the pandemic, we're a bustling city, lots of development, lots of business, lots of things going on, battling housing issues, traffic, all those kinds of things. We had to stop and completely pivot to what was happening with the pandemic. So we are now in the business of things I never thought that our city would be in, like, for instance, feeding children on the weekends and passing out food and delivering food and supplies to our seniors. And we've just had to make sure that taking ourselves down from this higher level of policies and other things down to the very most basic needs of our community. And making that shift has been a little difficult for all of us. But I think that in Santa Clara, the good thing about our city is that we're resilient, we're still on the smaller end, and we can get it done without a lot of bureaucracy. And I think that's the difference between us and the larger cities like San Jose and others that that not only have the number of people, a lot more than we have, but we're able to pivot successfully. Going forward, we're going to have a lot of challenges. We had a council meeting this morning to talk about the racial issues and the changes we need to make in our police department and the discussions we have to have. They're uncomfortable. It's at a time that it's unprecedented for not only the pandemic. Our city manager described it as two viruses now in our community: the pandemic and then what's happening in the world. As a mayor and as a mother, my children they're angry. They want to help. It's a completely different world. So I think that as mayors and as leaders in the community, we are the ones that our constituents see. We're the ones they can see and touch and call and talk to. We're at the ground level on the front lines here, and I think they expect a lot out of us. And we've had to respond to whatever those needs are. I know Mayor Klein goes to restaurants and does whatever he can there. I'm passing out masks every weekend for different districts in our city. We're doing whatever we can, and considering that most of us are part-time. These are part-time jobs for us. We don't have huge staffs like some of the other big cities,
right.
Keep that in mind, but we are really, in Santa Clara, we're adapting to whatever needs to happen very fluidly. So two different worlds, pre-COVID now, and then the next world that's coming is how are we going to adapt to businesses reopening, and how are we going to keep our budgets and other things that are, on all of our minds right now.
So be real with us for a minute.
Yes.
Is it frightening? Do you find yourself scared? Where do you get the wherewithal to hold up under these incredible demands that are now placed upon you?
I think that every morning when, we get the reports of whether it's the health issues or the police activity or, the protests, whatever is happening in our city, I wake up in the morning and think, if I'm not strong and to be able to, provide a leadership for my community, then why am I even here? So you have to really dig deep and find some inner strength to go out and say, okay, the world's not caving in. We're not all falling apart, that there is optimism and hope. I think if you don't give hope to your residents, all is lost. There has to be some hope there. And I think those are our jobs, whether mayor, council members, or anyone in a leadership position on a local level. We have to provide some hope.
Thank you, Mayor. Before we go over to Mayor Scharf, I want to say to our listeners and participants that the whole point of this is for you to be asking questions, and you will shortly have that opportunity. So be thinking of them. You can post them on the Q&A function, and we will immediately start working them in, and we're looking forward to this being a full-blown dialogue. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Scharf is the mayor of Cupertino. And Mayor Scharf, we're delighted you're with us. We're very anxious to hear your own point of view and how things are in Cupertino as of 11:12 this morning.
Okay, thank you for inviting me. As everyone knows, Cupertino, we call ourselves the brain of Silicon Valley. Sunnyvale got the heart, which we wanted, but the brain is fine for all of us as well. We've been coping well with the COVID-19 pandemic. We were the first city in Santa Clara County to implement a face covering requirement. We were following the examples of 7 other Bay Area counties, unfortunately not our own. I know since then, Palo Alto, Milpitas, and San Jose have also implemented face covering requirements. Financially, we were in good shape prior to the pandemic in terms of our reserves and our pension funding. We did not have to make any drastic cuts, although we did furlough our part-time employees that are mainly in the Parks and Rec department, since there are no classes or summer camps that will be scheduled. But we did not lay off any of our full-time staff, and everyone is now working either remotely or, in the case of Public Works, in person. We've been able to provide significant rental assistance to our low-income renters via grants from the city to West Valley Community Services, as well as zero interest and low interest loans through other financial institutions, including credit unions and another online source that does this kind of thing. We deferred most or many of our 20 to 21 capital improvement projects to conserve money. We depend heavily on business-to-business sales tax revenue and transient occupancy taxes, and of course that revenue is going to be greatly reduced for the foreseeable future. We are working to reopen to the extent allowed by the state and county. I know that in all cities, people are getting antsy to get out. We've reopened our tennis courts and golf courses under the restrictions imposed by the county. Our restaurants, of course, are suffering greatly. The takeout business is not sufficient, and we're looking forward to the outdoor dining that will be allowed starting tomorrow. And we will be meeting tomorrow to pass whatever's necessary in terms of city ordinances to allow that, reducing parking requirements, etc. However, it should be said, with the trend to remote working, it's going to be difficult for some of the restaurants that depend heavily on lunch business to come back. We all, I know, saw that Specialties has closed all their restaurants. They didn't have one in Cupertino, but they depended heavily on the lunch business and catering, and that's going to be gone for the foreseeable future. Now, on the plus side, when I go out in the evening for a walk or a bike ride, it's so crowded out there now. So many people are out there walking and bicycling and all trying to walk in a way or bike in a way to avoid getting close to each other. But hopefully when this is over, people will still decide to go out at night for a walk or a bike ride. I think it's good to see the families out there together. Our IT department, I should praise them. They were totally prepared for what was necessary in this situation, and all the employees that are working from home that didn't have sufficient necessary technology, it was provided to them. We didn't miss a single council meeting. I've had a lot of residents, I'm sure all the mayors have, offering up ideas and of course complaints about the shelter in place. We patiently responded to all of them, either myself or the city manager. In terms of retail, one of the biggest complaints, I was surprised, was a popular retail nursery in our city, Yamagamis, that was forced to close, and we worked with the business owner and the county to turn them, quote, into an essential business so they could reopen early. All they had to do was start selling bottled water and cleaning supplies, and that enabled them to reopen. We've taken the lead in collecting and passing out face coverings. We've probably received 75,000 masks and homemade face coverings, and I've been out on bringing them out to our senior living communities, as well as people coming to pick them up at City Hall. And in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have our other pandemic now, the police brutality issue against African Americans. And this is the pandemic that it just seems our country can never seem to address. It just goes on. And I don't have a solution to this. We're expecting a protest on Saturday afternoon in Cupertino, and hopefully we expect it to be peaceful. We have not implemented a curfew upon the advice of our county sheriff, who provides law enforcement. And I know while Cupertino is very diverse in some respects, we don't have a significant African American population. And increasing diversity in our cities is something we should strive for. And any ideas of how we do that would be welcome. And I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious, since the onset of the crises, what has been most surprising to you personally?
I guess it's how everyone seems to want to help their neighbors, which, a lot of times you don't even know who your neighbors are in this area. And yet, if someone asks for help doing something, or getting groceries or whatever, and it's on Nextdoor or Facebook, there's always someone that says, I'd be happy to come over and help you. And no, I don't want any money for helping you. I'm thrilled to do it. We had one resident that emailed me complaining that he got a notice that one of his trees was overhanging the sidewalk and he only had 5 days to clear it. And I said, listen, I live near you. I'll bring my chainsaw over and I'll do it for you. It's no problem. It'll only take me a couple of minutes. He was kind of taken aback. And actually he said, oh, that's okay. I'll go trim it myself. But I think the reaching out of neighbors to be helping neighbors is something that I've been thrilled to see, and I hope can continue once this whole pandemic is over. I hope we don't go back to the time where you didn't even know your neighbor's name. I used to know more of my neighbor's dogs' names than the actual neighbors' names. And I hope we can change that. Thank you.
Wonderful, thanks. Questions are pouring in. So let's get right to it. The first question came from Peter Katz. Thank you, Peter. He says, so many of our residents live in one city, but they actually work in another. That's true. Certainly true for myself. How can we better coordinate services, policies, and activities regionally? Mayor Klein, would you like to take the first stab at that?
Sure, and I think that's one of the issues that all of our communities face, as far as transportation is a big thing, and what the new norm will be after the shelter in place ends will be interesting. We're in a big time of change, and how many high-tech companies end up deciding that a good portion of their workforce can now work remotely. And so, all these things are being discussed, at the county level, at the regional level, you know, I've been having calls with County Supervisor Cindy Chavez, MTC, ABAG. We've been actually having discussions on how transportation changes. You know, a lot of people will hopefully, you know, be able to work remotely. There are definitely a certain portion of our population that still has to go to their jobs. So we constantly, and that's a constant battle that we have from a city standpoint of, you know, we can fix a certain portion of the transportation. You know, some of that is from our residents going to businesses or going to retail. Some of it is employees coming into work. But there's usually about 30% of the traffic that's just passing through our city. So it's those balances. And I do think that an initiative to make sure that as many people can work from home, if it's only 1 or 2 days a week, would make sure that we don't go back to the gridlock that we've seen for years. It's only gotten progressively worse over the last few years. And I think that, you know, it's incumbent upon all of our cities to work with our businesses and change even our city staffs to say, oh, you can work at home, you know, 1 or 2 days a week. So I think it's defining what that new normal is and figuring out how we move towards, you know, an improvement of air quality, an improvement of traffic, an improvement of, you know, having more people bike and walk, you know, around their communities and even to work.
Mm-hmm. Mayor Scharf, Mayor Gillmor, anything you would add? How can we better coordinate services across cities?
Yeah, that's always been a challenge. And, you know, if you have a 2-worker household, you can't be moving every time one or the other changes jobs. That, you know, it doesn't work that way. So whenever I hear live, work, play, I kind of cringe because I know, you know, the world doesn't really work that way. As far as coordinating services, I think the biggest issue we have has been transit. And, you know, in Cupertino, we have no light rail and no Caltrain. We did start our own via shuttle, which has been extremely popular for people to go within Cupertino as well as to Sunnyvale Caltrain and Kaiser, and soon over to El Camino Hospital. I don't know how we deal with the transportation issue, especially now with the revenue limitations. We're obviously not going to be doing any big capital transportation projects in the near future. But remote working, I think, like Mayor Klein said, even if people remote worked 1 day a week, that's a 20% reduction in the number of cars out on the road commuting to work. 2 days a week would be wonderful. I'd also like to see more invested in bicycle infrastructure so people, you know, feel more comfortable about not using their car to go to work. I know my wife works over in Santa Clara by Freedom Circle. She's been riding her bike many days a week until the curfew started. And then she said, I can't ride my bike anymore because I can't, you know, leave by the time that curfew in Santa Clara starts. So I think transportation between communities is a key issue. If we could expand our shuttle to serve other cities in cooperation, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks. Mayor Gillmor, I'm going to put the next question to you, if I might. It comes from Winston Ashby. And Winston leads an organization that works with youth, and his organization has been communicating with students in Cupertino and Santa Clara. And his question is, how have the cities been creating opportunities to provide youth to engage in service and also to have people checking in about their well-being? Mayor Gillmor.
Okay. But I did want to tell Mayor Scharf that he can tell his wife she can ride his bike since our curfew was only on for 2 days. So it's off. She can ride now.
You got that, Mayor?
Yeah.
So what about the youth?
Okay. So Santa Clara has a very ambitious youth program. We have a youth commission that is very involved, very visible, and they do give us a lot of recommendations to the city council. We have some of our youth now working with our senior center to do wellness checks on our seniors and others, and we have our youth volunteering on our weekend healthy meals program and other things. It's come down a little bit during the pandemic because of the shelter in place, and many of our youth that are very, very involved, they're home making masks and other types of volunteering and donating in the ways that they can. Many of their parents don't want them out distributing with the public and other things, but they're coming up with really creative ways of keeping people connected in the community in terms of social media and other things. So now that they're out of school, I think they're even going to ramp up even more in terms of being involved. They want to be involved. The problem we're having in Santa Clara is we don't have enough jobs for them. In fact, it's not just the youth, but it's many of our residents in the city. They really want to help. People want to help. And we have very few opportunities at this point in time for them to be able to do that. But we're trying to really foster that sense of community with our youth, and especially in our youth and our seniors, because they'll make phone calls. Our seniors are on the phone, and they'll do the wellness checks and other things. So it's a little challenging right now because we can't have them physically out, but as things open up more, I think this has been, if there's any light in this darkness, it's that the thought of public service for the youth in Santa Clara has gone up dramatically. The thought of being involved, not just with the protests, but with the pandemic as well. There is an overswelling of need to be involved in our community, and a majority of it is coming from our young people. So it does give hope. And
Mayor Scharf, quickly to you, tell us about the Youth of Cupertino.
So last week we interviewed for our teen commission. So this time it was easy. We only had 41 applicants for 3 seats. Last time there were over 60 people to interview. And the youth, they really want to help. I mean, they want to know how they can help serve the community. And as well as the emails I've received recently from the youth regarding the what transpired in Minneapolis and their demands for change. Like in Santa Clara, a lot of the youth are helping to make face coverings. In fact, in our city hall, we're like drowning in face coverings now. They're all over the city. We have a very small city hall, and there's boxes of these everywhere. And inside each package of face coverings, there's a note from mainly teenagers that have made these. So like in Santa Clara, we need to find ways to help our youth engage more, because they really want to help our community, even though they're busy with school, and they make time for community service, and we should do as much as we can to enable that. We started, because there's so much demand by teens to help, we started another sort of teen commission called our Youth Activities Board, which coordinates activities for teens. So, it's up to us as the mayors and city council members to ensure that we can find ways to allow our teens and young people to help our cities. Thank you.
Very good, thanks. And Winston, who posed the question, is anxious to connect with you, Mayor Scharf, and I'll leave it for the two of you to do that. I'm going to pose the next question to Mayor Klein. We'll start with you, Mayor Klein, and it's a straightforward question. What types of renter assistance programs are you offering in Sunnyvale?
Sure, I'd be happy to talk about that. The first night of the shelter in place, our council met, and at that point set aside $250,000 to Sunnyvale Community Services. Sunnyvale Community Services is in its 50th year of helping residents here in Sunnyvale. And so they do a wide variety of things, from food to utility assistance, rent assistance, backpack to school. But that first night of shelter in place, council approved $250,000. And since then, we've done a large portion of the CDBG money, so another about $700,000 just to help just to help residents here in our city. So that's what we're doing from rental assistance. And then when we didn't think that the county measure as far as eviction moratorium went far enough, we also put in place a moratorium on evictions for people in the mobile home community, as well as extending the payback period at the end of the shelter in place from 120 days, which the county did, to 180 days. So residents have 6 months to pay back their rent at the end of the shelter in place, the termination of that. So, those are some of the things that we're doing. From a program standpoint, we rely heavily on our service agency, which a lot of the high-tech companies have also contributed to basically add additional help and additional assistance to our residents.
Mayor Gillmor, what about your city in terms of renters assistance?
Sorry about that. Yeah, so we use our CDBG funds and our housing department to help with those who need financial assistance and those who need housing. So we have a phenomenal housing director, Jonathan Beach, and he does work with anyone who is needing of a home or a shelter. And also he manages our CDBG money. We got a big chunk of money from the government, the federal government, to amplify our rental assistance program in Santa Clara. So we've done that. And of course, we put a pause on any evictions, like I know other cities have done as well. We're also trying to assist our community. We own our own electric utility in Santa Clara, like they do in Palo Alto. And so we gave a $30 credit to all of our residents in Santa Clara, especially those renting. So people really help that, considering our average bill is like $35 or $40 a month. So we're trying everything we can to make sure that our residents don't end up homeless, and but mainly through our housing department and our CDBG funds. That's what we're doing.
Great, thanks. I have a question coming in from Rajiv Mathur, and he wants to talk about trails. The trails in our region are even more important now as a way to counter cabin fever. That's for real. I have a case of that. There are several trail extension projects which require funds. We know, of course, the budgets have to be juggled, but Rajiv wants to put in a strong word for these projects. He's hoping they're not going to be cut. Let's start with you, Mayor Klein.
Absolutely, and I've been a big advocate for the trails in our region. I've pushed, so I was part of the Four Cities Stevens Creek Trail Extension Citizens Committee approximately 7 or 8 years ago. And one of the things as mayor is being able to advocate for trails and the need for trails. I was working with Mountain View, which is the lead agency on the next extension of the Stevens Creek Trail going south, which it's a mixture of land between Sunnyvale, Mountain View, as well as the Water District. And was able to finally get them to commit staff and money to $600,000 for that, so that then Sunnyvale could immediately match that. And then we put 1.2 million into basically requesting VTA matching funds. And so that's a positive win for trying to improve that trail. I think, more trail systems, the fewer times that bicycles and pedestrians actually have to interface with cars, and having more of that system throughout our communities is all the better. And I understand during difficult budget times, those projects might be cut. We're still moving ahead with lots of projects within the city, as well as, pushing for that trail system that helps everyone at a regional standpoint.
Great. Mayor Scharf, I'm curious, any breaking developments on trails, on the trail?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, tell us, please.
Oh, yes. Okay, so we have 2 trail projects. One is a project that connects our nature center on McClellan to Linda Vista Park. A former mayor, Mayor Lowenthal, donated some land for a trail, and the city's accepting that donation, and we have to do some improvements on it, not major, in order to open up that link. We have another trail that goes from our library through a neighborhood and connects to an existing trail. This is called the Ragnar Creek Trail. This has been controversial, like often these trails are. It goes on water district land, and there are some residents whose houses back up to the water district land that frankly, didn't ever want anything to go onto that land, even though actually that trail had been open several decades ago as a connection to a school that was near there. So we were moving forward. That was funded in our budget last year. There's still efforts by those who oppose it to defund it, but so far it continues to pass on a 5-0 vote, and we are hopeful that we can begin construction by the end of the year. Now, 2 years ago, I went to a conference hosted by the Water District called the Trails and Waterways, and the district really encourages cities to work on creating trails along waterways. They don't provide money for it, but they're willing to sign joint use agreements so those can be developed. And we all know a lot of the trails in our area are along creeks. We have San Tomas Aquino Trail, the Stevens Creek Trail, the Los Gatos Creek Trail. So I would love to see more creekside trails and having them connect without all these gaps. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to go to the next question. It comes from somebody who labels himself Vitas. It says, a lot of small business owners took initiative to board up their stores prior to the protests. Is the fear a proper response? And how can police and city councils assure constituents of their safety? I'm going to toss that to you first, Mayor Gillmor.
Okay, this has become an issue in our city just on the safety aspect just in the last week or so. We did have to in Santa Clara because we had some very credible threats to our businesses on Stevens Creek Boulevard and Winchester Boulevard in the city. So we, our police department city manager issued the curfew just to make sure our small businesses could be protected. And we did have a couple of businesses hit, but because Santa Clara and San Jose share Valley Fair Mall, we were assisting the city of San Jose in what happened. And we were very fortunate. There wasn't a lot of issues with the mall areas, but we did get hit on some of our small businesses on Stevens Creek and also on El Camino in Santa Clara. I feel like we took the curfew off and that our police department would be able to handle any of the issues from here on out. So boarding the businesses, I don't think is necessary at this point. There's so many protests and the majority of them are peaceful protests. So I just don't see that is going to be an issue. But one issue that has come up with our small businesses is, first of all, they're suffering very, very badly in this area. And all of us in all of our cities, our small businesses are the heart and soul of our community. And when our businesses are suffering from the pandemic, first of all, and then now adding this on, and I'll give you an example. We have a business on Stevens Creek Boulevard. It's a small family-owned business, and they've been taking painstakingly, important measures to make sure that all of their employees and their customers are safe with their food distribution and everything else. Well, now because they have a majority of their employees that are young, and most of them have been protesting, so they're out. And so when they come back now, they have not been social distancing, and now they're all worried about putting others at risk possibly for COVID-19. So now they're hit with the issues of, do we quarantine those the employees that have been protesting? Do we let them come in even though we know some people are working or of compromised immune systems and other things? So our small businesses are, the things that they're facing now that are just piling onto them is pretty incredible. And I know Santa Clara, we started a small business assistance program. We're up to 150 businesses that we've given grants to, just outright money grants to. And I know Sunnyvale's doing it, and I think Cupertino's talking about it too. we're trying to do whatever we can to help them, because out of every business out there, it's our small businesses that if they don't survive, our communities are going to have a difficult time surviving. They're so that important to us. So whether it's the protection or whether it's financial assistance or, you know, keeping their employees safe so that they're able to work, all of those things are, I think, on the forefront of our minds here in Santa Clara.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I'm going to go to a question that came in from Mary Lynn Bernard. And she asks, many residents of our communities have written to council members to reform their police. So the question is, do any of your councils have a citizens oversight committee? And if so, does that include a council member on the panel? Let's start with you, Mayor Klein at Sunnyvale.
Sure. Currently, we do not have a citizens oversight committee, and we have a very well-defined complaint process that has worked for many years. That being said, you know, what's really been the response here to all the things that are happening around the U.S. is figuring out how we evaluate whether or not that process is correct. And from our standpoint, you know, it's like in most of our cities, the operation of our police department to some degree is operational. You know, we set policy, we put things in place. That being said, you know, everything can be improved. And I've been talking to our city manager, I've been talking to, you know, our chief of police. Sunnyvale is kind of unique from one degree. You know, it's one of the few cities in the nation where our police and fire are all the same. We only have a public safety department, meaning every officer is trained in police, in fire, and EMS. And I think that also changes to some degree what the mindset is for a lot of our officers. That being said, you know, I've committed to looking at reform, to having an open dialogue. And what's most important is the city manager and the police and the chief of police. Our chief has also said that they're committed to having an open dialogue, getting community input, and figuring out are there policies and procedures that ultimately need to change.
I want to go to Mayor Scharf and ask you the same question. First of all, asking you if you believe in citizen oversight over the police.
So like Saratoga, the questioner is councilpersons in Saratoga. We have our police services through the county sheriff. And this was brought up at our last council meeting about we really don't have a good understanding of what all the policies and procedures are from the sheriff's department regarding the questions residents have had in the past few days. I keep getting a list of 8 things, 8 questions on things like chokeholds and shooting at moving vehicles. And at our last council meeting, we said, hey, we really need to start something about this. We had, you know, we're a very low crime community in terms of violent crime, you know, a lot of property crime, but not much violent crime. And we haven't had any incidents that we have even thought would require something like this. But now it's been brought to our attention with all the protests, and we are going to move forward, and hopefully in conjunction with Saratoga, who shares our West Valley substation, and just understand where the sheriff's department is coming from, and if we need to start having some kind of oversight. And hopefully it would be between the 2 cities that use the sheriff's department. Maybe we'd involve Los Altos Hills as well, which also contracts out. But it's a very good question, and something, to be honest, we never really thought about much before because it had never been raised.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Gillmor, I'm going to
Could I answer that question, if you don't mind?
I would love you to, please.
Thank you. Santa Clara is unique. We are the only city in California that elects our police chief. So we have an automatic citizens oversight with our police chief being elected. And we have a new police chief that was just elected in March, and he has to run again in November. So he's coming in at a very interesting time with the pandemic and the other virus, which is, going on here. So with what happened with Mr. Floyd. So we have that, but I was just going to, yesterday, I signed up and signed on to the former President Obama has a pledge for mayors around the country. And I don't know if Mayor Klein and Mayor Scharf have heard about this. If not, we can send information, but from my Brothers Keeper Alliance, it's a pledge that we will do 4 things. One, that our city would review our police use of force policies. That 2, we would engage our communities by including a diverse range of input, experiences, and stories in our review. 3, that we would report our findings of our review to our community and seek feedback. And 4, that we will reform our community's police use of force policies. And I think that getting that input, at least we're starting to take some kind of action and review what we need to review and what the country is really wanting us to do right now. And they're telling us this in so many different ways. So we need to listen. And so I would suggest that my fellow mayors go and look at that, at signing on to that pledge.
Thank you. Let's see, Mayor Klein, I'll address this question to you just randomly. It comes from Barbara Williams. It has this plaintive tone. How can we open up our personal care shops? Mine have procured the necessary equipment. This is unfair since we have opened up our farmers markets where people are not social distancing. So Mayor Klein, what do you think?
So, I don't know what they're seeing from their farmers markets, but definitely, I see that there is appropriate social distancing. We completely redid how our weekly farmers market Saturday, 9 to 1 is actually being done. We're only using half the streets now, so we're moved everybody to one side. And I think that that's really good. From a services standpoint, I totally understand. My wife has been doing my haircuts, and I think I think we're moving there very quickly now. We're starting to see things open up, but at the end of the day, it's like we do really need to follow the county health order. I'm very impressed with the leadership of Dr. Cody. And from a service industry, there are lots of different things that even at a state level, the governor has been having issues with. And so, I totally understand. That's one of the reasons why we put our, business assistance program in place to help, restaurants that were able to continue, but as well as like the service industry, the nail shops, the hair salons, to try to get some funds. So we're currently doing grants of 5, 10, or 15K, and our grant program is actually been fairly positive. We're still getting a lot of high-tech companies that are contributing to it. So, I understand the concerns, but to me, it's important that we do follow the health orders at the end of the day.
Thank you. Basically, the decision whether to open is out of your hands. That's in the hands of the county. Is that a fair characterization? Yeah. That
is a fair characterization. We actually did a few things more restrictive than the county, like we closed playgrounds. We saw that was an issue before the county ended up putting that in later. It's like, and it's from a city standpoint, I have this complaint from a lot of residents, please open this up or that up. It's whatever is most restrictive. Is it the state? Is it the county? Or is it your city? And right. And ultimately, from our standpoint, we'd like everything to be open up, but we need to follow health orders. We don't define our own health orders at the end of the day. We're not health experts. As much as I would like to be that, I am not a health expert and I have my opinions, but everybody has opinions on that. We do need to follow what the county health orders are.
Thank you. We're running short on time, so I'm now going to conflate a couple of questions. They all have to do with homelessness and the housing issue. For example, Marianne Chauvelin asks if you would describe your plans and ideas on solving the homeless problem, particularly those who are living in RVs and cars. Other questioners, Connie Cunningham, Nicholas Adams, had similar questions. So let me start with you, Mayor Scharf. Talk about the homeless issue and whether you see it worsening as a result of COVID.
Yeah, so in Cupertino, right now we have 2 homeless encampments, both of them on Wolf Road, one south of 280, one north of 280. Per the CDC guidelines, we are not doing anything to, no homeless sweeps. We don't do that. It's not advised. We are going to start providing services like porta potties and sinks to one of them. It's been challenging because it's not actually on our land. It's on Caltrans land, the biggest one, but we are going to be able to do that. The big issue is we offer the unhoused residents, and I think someone advised me, stop calling them homeless, call them unhoused residents. I think that was a good suggestion. But we do offer unhoused residents when there's space available in shelters. And, the fact is a lot of times people don't want to move to shelters and they prefer to be camping. That said, I've asked the county about hotel rooms because I know there was money coming from FEMA for hotel rooms. And I was informed that, well, yes, the federal government will fund 75% of the cost of a hotel room, but the qualifications for that is the person needs to be at risk, either have COVID or be at risk for COVID or have health issues. So we have not been able to get, that money to pay for hotel rooms. And I know the same situation is occurring in San Francisco and other areas. Now, long term, we need to find ways of permanent housing. And in Cupertino, I think it was 2 years ago, there was a approval of a SB 35 project at the former Valco Mall that would provide 1,201 below market rate units. They're all for singles and couples. There's none for families, and that's a fallout of the SB 35 law. It's not something the city prefers, but we don't have any choice in that. And hopefully when those 1,200 units are built, that will help relieve some of the problem. But again, those are below market rate units, and it's very competitive to get them, and you have to have income to qualify for those. It's not free housing. So, in terms of adding more shelters, I would not be opposed if we could have a shelter in our city, if we could find, some land for that or a building. Right now, we're served by the shelter in Sunnyvale, which, our unhoused residents, are free to go to. That said, there's also a case in Los Angeles where a judge said you cannot have unhoused residents on a freeway on-ramp, which is the case of one of ours in Sunnyvale, saying it's not safe for them to be there because of the pollution and the physical danger from the cars. But right now, that was the case in LA. It hasn't affected anything we do in Cupertino. I get a lot of complaints from residents about those encampments, and I tell them the same thing. It's like, we're following the CDC guidance, and we are not doing anything to remove those unhoused residents from those encampments until the shelter in place is over. But, obviously they can't remain there forever. And once this is over, new accommodations will have to be found for the people living there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Klein, I'm going to go to you next. And actually, this will have to be our last question. And so we'll hear from you, Mayor Klein, and then we'll hear from you, Mayor Gillmor. It's the same subject, but Mayor Klein, your thoughts on the unhoused residents of your city. And then I'm going to add in another comment from Milo Traus, who asks if the mayors see housing and transportation as racial justice policy. Do you recognize the link between zoning restrictions and racial exclusion? What do you have to say about that, Mayor Klein?
Sure. So let me first talk about the unhoused and what the shelter is in Sunnyvale. And it's not a drop-in cold weather shelter. One of the things when I got on council was I pushed to make sure that the shelter, which was in Sunnyvale, and it's slightly different because it's only referral. It's the transitionary housing zone. But I talked to the county supervisors and ultimately got them to sponsor, and now it is a year-round shelter, but it's all through recommendations from the different service agencies around the county. And it's also, so it's more important that once you're placed at the shelter, and we have tons of families there. We currently have about 20 kids, but it's 125 beds that's now been expanded to 175 beds year round. And they have a place to stay every night until they get placed in permanent housing. So it's really important from that standpoint. Sorry, Mayor Scharf, it isn't a drop-in area. It's a permanent housing until they find it's a transition for those homes. And so from our standpoint, that has been critical as far as providing, a permanent place, because those families that have some semblance of normalcy, that their kids are going to schools, they're getting food, they're getting services from the county, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and that's really important. So yes, it's something like that model. It can be duplicated around the county, and if Mayor Scharf has land, I'd be happy to see the county set up another similar sort of transitionary shelter, because I think that's important. Ultimately we need, I've been pushing for affordable housing for years and working with affordable housing nonprofits to get that built within our communities. That being said, we don't have enough of that housing. As far as the social impacts of zoning and transportation, definitely we have issues around the region as far as that's concerned. The majority of people that are using VTA services are those people that are at the lowest economic rung and need that conceivably to get to work. And so from a zoning standpoint, we're doing everything in our city to help zoning, add additional housing. We're looking at our Moffett Park and evaluating to add up to 6,000 or 7,000 units there. So we're trying to do whatever we can to make more housing. And every time we create new housing, whether or not it's for sale or apartment, a percentage of that will always be affordable. And so that's the best thing we can do to try to make sure that there's housing and for all people in our community.
Thank you. We are completely out of time. So Mayor Gillmor, you get the last word. You're our final respondent. Anything that you want to add in 30 seconds or less about your unhoused residents?
Well, we work with the Salvation Army very closely, and they said to me that one of the lieutenants last week said, Santa Clara has a large home unhoused population, but they hide themselves very well. And I think that what we've noticed during this pandemic, that they're coming out of hiding, which has allowed us to help clothe them, help feed them, and to identify their specific needs in our community. We have St. Justin's Ministry in the center of our town that provides a lot of service for our unhoused. But we're trying to identify them now so that we can get them help, the ones that need help. And in Santa Clara, we have approved a lot of units in the last couple of years for all different levels of affordable housing, which are still in process. And post-pandemic, we're going to have those up and open and hand over keys to people that need them, especially our unhoused project on Santa Moss Expressway in Monroe. So we're doing what we can as we identify them and find them and help them. So it's such a huge need, and of course transportation, but transportation needs to go where they need to go, when they need to go, and consistently. So people on the lower income scale, they need to get to their jobs. They need to be able to rely on that transportation. It needs to be reliable, and right now it's not.
Very good. Thank you. We're completely out of time. My instructions now are to pass it over back to Angeli and to Nick Kaspar with the chambers. I just want to say thank you. I want to thank our audience for joining us. And I want to thank our three mayors for speaking candidly and vulnerably, and for answering a call to public service. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you. And I also want to extend a thank you to the three mayors for joining us, and you, Dr. Russell Hancock, for joining us. I know it's a crazy time right now with several different really big crises going on. So thank you for taking the time to do that. And thank you for everyone for joining us and really getting some good information. It's obviously crazy right now, and we're going to get through this. And the more that we could work together as cities, the better information we have, the more we'll be able to address this. So thank you, everyone. And with that, we could go ahead and wrap it up.